Railway Conversations with Doc Frank.
Welcome to another episode of Railway Conversations with Doc Frank. I'm your host of this podcast, Doc Frank, and my guest today is Matthew Rea from Kent in England. The conversation with Matthew actually took place before I started the podcast, just a couple of days after I did my very first interview, which would later get into one of the podcast episodes. Matthew is a signaling trainer, as I am, and we're talking a lot about signaling training. You will get to hear how the CBTC Kickstarter training was incepted, and also how I got later to other trainings such as the ETCS Kickstarter. These are my two flagship training courses, in case you haven't heard it in any of the previous episodes. And we are also talking about a number of other things, including the inception of the podcast and how it came about that I did my very first interview with a guest that I didn't even know 24 hours earlier. I hope you enjoy this episode. As you have probably heard before, this podcast is not sponsored by third parties. However, I do want you to know that I am providing signaling trainings on a number of topics, including CBTC, that's communications-based train control, ETCS, that's the European train control system, also automatic train control in more general terms, and high-capacity signaling also in general. Two training courses that I'm doing in the very near future are a course called Automatic Train Control and Interoperability. That course will take place on the 28th and 29th of March next week. And in this course, I'm talking about the definition of automatic train control in general. Then I explain the basics of the main technologies for automatic train control. That is CBTC, ETCS, especially ETCS level 2, and also a system called ATMS, the Advanced Train Management System, which is a specific development here in Australia for the interstate network. And then I go into the topic of interoperability between those different technologies. A very interesting course, not just for people living in Australia, but also for international students, and I can highly recommend it. In the week after, I'm doing a free event. I'm doing a challenge that is all about the Melbourne signaling strategy. This event will take place on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th of April. 3 webinars of 2 hours each on each of the 3 days. And as I said, it's completely free. I will do some minor training bits and pieces in these webinars. And there's also open forum for discussion where people with interest in signaling in Melbourne can offer their views on why the previous strategy didn't work and what needs to be done to make a future strategy work. Again, highly recommendable. And for both of these events, you can register on my training portal, which is docfranktraining.podia.com. I repeat, that's docfranktraining, one word, .podia, that's PODIA.com. I hope I see you at one of my training courses, and until then, please enjoy my conversation with Matthew Rea.
And then in 2014, I actually came back to my passion for training. I thought, I want to do a training for CBTC. I had such a hard time learning about CBTC because Thales gave me nothing. Thales didn't give me any training whatsoever. They said, you're with the company for like 2 months now. And before that, you worked with Siemens for 17 years. Oh, that's interesting. They thought I was an industry spy. And then I started reading some things on the internet, and finally I got my hands on some documentation and I found it to be so logical, so commonsensical, but still it was such a hard time. And a few years later, I thought CBTC became more trendy in Australia.
Yeah, and you just don't put all your eggs in one basket, do you? I mean, that's effectively what the outcome of this is. You've got to be constantly looking around to see Carry on, sorry.
A few years later, CBTC was picking up. So it started in Sydney. I worked in Perth also on technology selection between CBTC and ETCS. Those were the two candidate technologies. And then I thought, okay, well, now we're getting to a point where more people in Australia will have to know about CBTC. Yeah. So where do they learn it from? There was almost nothing on the internet. There were no books about CBTC. I tell you what, in 2014, I typed CBTC into Google. You know what the first thing was that came up? The Cardiff Business and Technology Centre.
No way.
Yeah,
not even railway.
I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. Back in 2014, there was no Wikipedia website about CBTC. There no nothing. Absolutely zilch. There wasn't a single book on CBTC. There was absolutely nothing. So I developed a training course. I launched that thing in 2014, late 2014. And that was my entry into training. Ever since, I've been doing CBTC trainings for the last 8 years. And then a few years later, I worked on an ETCS project in Sydney. I spoke to the project director and said, well, I'm doing this CBTC training. I could do something like this for ETCS if that was of interest. It was of interest, so that was my entry into ETCS training. Yeah.
Fantastic.
And and that was in parallel to all the consulting stuff that I did anyway, at least until COVID. Since COVID started, things fell a bit into a heap because live training courses were really not that feasible anymore, and and interstate consulting with frequent air travel was just not happening either.
Yes.
So
did you go online then?
I did, but slowly. I had a bit of a dip during COVID. There were a few things that affected me more than I would have liked to. And it was a full-blown crisis in hindsight. So I basically lost 2 years. I still did a few things. So I started doing training courses via Zoom, via video conferencing, basically same as we do here. If I was just screen sharing, showing you my training slides, that would be the course. If you have a question, you can ask me, I'll answer it. And I could do this with small groups as well, and that worked well. That worked really well. So the learning successes, there were tests at the end, and the learning success was just as good as previously in the live classroom training. So I was quite happy with that. But the numbers of participants came down quite a bit from the live courses. But that was still something that I did at least once in a while. I still had some smaller consulting gigs that I was allowed to do remotely. So I worked still on one project on the Australian East Coast, and I worked on one project in New Zealand. Everything from home, everything from Perth. So that was still going on in the early stages of COVID. But still a huge slump in business. So the first year of COVID, my business collapsed by 90%.
Blimey.
Yeah.
But that's an effective use of time, isn't it? I mean, that's really what you've got to do. You make hay whilst the sun shines.
Yes.
So when shit like COVID turns up, you've got that buffer.
Yeah.
And a lot of companies went bust.
Yeah.
But you managed to survive, which is, it's not remarkable, but it's, that's resilience, and that's because of what you've done prior.
Very much so. Very much so. And I did survive COVID, and I'm just starting to ramp up again. So what I do now, finally, and it's finally. So I basically got back on my feet about 3 months ago, 2.5, 3 months ago.
Yeah.
And because I thought I've been hanging around for long enough, I really need to get myself into gear. Otherwise, I will get problems. So I survived reasonably well for 2 years, but then it really and it was like COVID was ramping down more or less, but at the same time, inflation, recession, everything was ramping up. So you basically went from one catastrophe to the next one. But the difference here was that I'm watching a lot of online stuff, YouTube, like, I don't know, motivational videos, call it what you wish, or educational videos or what have you. With COVID, nobody really knew what was going on. Everyone was uncertain. With recession, what happened was that I kept hearing the same messages from several of my, say, role models or so. Everybody said, in the next 2 years, that's really a decision maker. Those who keep sitting on their asses, do nothing, will be dead in 2 years.
Absolutely.
Those who do something and see this as an opportunity to grow, and they show up and they be active and so on, they can be huge winners over the next 2 years. So I looked at these two options and I said, well, honestly, let's go for the winner side. What else can you do, you know?
Exactly. So you can't just sit back.
Yeah. So at the moment, finally, I'm doing all the stuff that I knew I had to do for the last 2 years, but now I'm actually doing it. So I bring my CBTC training online, and I'm really proud of it. But then I thought, well, wait a minute, online training, there's a big risk. And the big risk is that people just don't do the training. They buy the course, and then it just sits there in the corner, and they don't have time, the family and this and that and the other, and they don't do the training. And I thought, how do I do this? And then I had the idea, and that's what I'm doing now. I'm doing a challenge. I'm doing a challenge with them. I mean, you come from the training business. You will have some appreciation for that, and you will tell me whether that's a good idea or not so good idea. Well, I think it's a good idea anyway.
Do it. Show me. Tell me.
So what I do is I will have registrations open for months. I'm closing New Year's Eve. So I'm closing registration 31st of December. On the 1st of January, I'm launching the training. So on the 1st of January, the first 2 of 6 modules will be issued to participants. After 2 weeks, I give them a bonus. I'm doing a live coaching call with question and answers and so on. So basically, I tell people, you've got to do those first 2 modules of the training in the next 2 weeks, because after 2 weeks, we will have a call. I will check on you that you've done your stuff. So there is I can't force them. I can't twist their arms, but at least.
But the thing is, they paid for it, haven't they?
Yeah.
That's
it's a paid course. It's $1,000 per ticket. Yeah. So, but they now have a scheduled event in 2 weeks where they know by then they are supposed to have done the first 2 modules.
Yeah.
Okay. And the coaching call, I call them coaching call, will be question answers and also a little bit of motivation. Hey, it's good that you're doing it, and this is why it's good for you to do it, and then just stick to it and so on. Next morning, module number 3 will be released. A week later, next coaching call about module number 3. And I'm repeating this 3 more times. So I've got 6 modules. The first 2 are in the first 2 weeks, and then there's 1 module every week. And there are 5 coaching calls at the end of every week. So the idea is to have a 6-week block in which they can do the entire training back to front. I mean, if they don't do it, they don't do it. I can't help it. But at least I'm hoping that by doing it this way, they are more motivated and have more guidance to do the training. You know, if I do a live classroom training, people sit with me in a classroom for 2 days solid. I mean, they can go out for a phone call for 5 minutes, but other than that, they're sitting in the room and I make them listen, right?
They have your undivided attention.
Yes.
That's effectively, you are there in the room for them exclusively.
Yeah. And it's the same on Zoom. I mean, at the moment, you're not doing Facebook or you're not sending emails or so, you're just listening. So if this was a training course, again, I would have your undivided attention, and we have scheduled meetings, and while you sit in the meeting, you're actually doing the training. Yeah, I mean,
which is why you're having that motivational session, because that's the equivalent. They've got online interfacing with a machine, the chat, they do that remotely, like the Open University, which is their model. And then you come in on the back end of that week, or the back end of the 2-week block in the first instance, do a revision session, do a review, do some motivational speaking to spur them on for the next module. I think it's a great idea.
Oh, thank you.
And then you need some assessment as well. So the assessment element.
There are,
so that's difficult. That's a difficult one online.
There are knowledge checks in there. So the platform that I'm using is offering the opportunity to do quizzes. So I can basically ask questions and then give them multiple choice answers that can be right or wrong. And so at the end of each module, there will be one of those, I call them knowledge checks or quizzes.
Knowledge check,
where they can basically have questions from the last module that they've done, and they can basically have some kind of check whether they've got it. Or if not, then maybe they can refer back to the material and say, oh, maybe I should watch this session and then one more time or something like that. So I cut down the lessons. So I'm trying to make no video lesson longer than 30 minutes. Give or take. Whereas in the live online trainings via video conferencing, I've got 90-minute sessions, and I've got two of them in a row with a quick stretch break. So I'm doing 3-hour blocks over 4 consecutive days, but they are split in the middle in 2 90-minute sessions, because I think that's pretty much the maximum where people can pay attention. Any more than 3 hours, people just will drop off.
Absolutely, and it's also getting around that the domain they're in. Being able to see them, eye contact. Making sure that they are engaged, because that's one of the things. Because I haven't stopped COVID. Right, when I was working on these projects for Network Rail and for the Elizabeth line, because we were deemed as what do the government call us? Essential workers. We were allowed to travel. We had a documentary statement that we could stay in a hotel. So it was all ring fenced. But I got type 1 diabetes, and I had COVID 3 times.
Ouch!
But luckily, not one of the put in hospital on a ventilator. But I tested positive for COVID 3 times. So it's sort of the obverse of what you're talking about. You're sort of dropped down, but ours, because it was a formal requirement for Network Rail to maintain their level of competence, and the Elizabeth line, even though it wasn't running, we were in class. So we were doing formal training, face-to-face, reduced numbers, rooms set up in a particular way until I got COVID. And then I came home and I had to convert the course I was doing into an online course overnight, and then carry on delivering it online. So what we're like as trainers. If there's an issue, that's not a barrier. We just change tack, put it in a different way. I mean, it was some extra money because I had to put everything into a format that we could deal with on Zoom. But it's exactly what you're saying. And I found precisely that. It's level of engagement. It's assuring that people aren't overstretched, giving them a sufficient break. All of the above. So your model is absolutely bang on. And the assessment at the end, so how do you do the formal assessment right at close of the 6 modules? How are you envisioning doing that?
In my live trainings, I had actually a test form. So in the classroom trainings, I had a printed 2-page test form that I gave around to every participant. They filled it in. They basically signed it or put their name in, which was the equivalent of a signature. And then they handed back the forms, and I took them away, evaluated them, and then they got a certificate with a score in there. Live online, I'm doing the same thing. So I still have the same test forms that I will send them over at the second last day of the training. And on the last day of the training, they have it in front of them electronically, and they can fill it in, like editing PDF or something like that. And
does the platform stop them from saving it? So there's there's no ability to share it, because that's one of my concerns is where you do online. It's like somebody.
If they want to cheat, they can cheat.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be a closed book test, and I tell them that.
Yeah.
In the live classroom training, obviously, I can check because I can see whether they've got the books open or not, and I can make them close them. Online doesn't work. If somebody has the course manual next to him, there's no way I can see this or check this or whatever. Yeah.
Well, they've got two screens open. They're looking at you on one screen. The other screen's got the notes on it.
Yeah, but this. I mean, maybe different from what you were doing. This is not a formal assessment that will have an impact on their careers or whatever. In my case, it's literally just for them to find out whether they have any gaps in the knowledge or not. Yeah. So if they think they treat the test as a reading exercise to find the right answers in the manual, and this is how they want to be happy, then be it. Yeah, I can't help it. So to some extent I'm trusting in the honesty of people to not cheat. But if somebody wanted to do it, if they think it looks better on their certificate, if there's 100% instead of 92%, and every time they look at it, they know this is only 100% because I cheated. I don't think that's a good idea. I wouldn't like that. No. I couldn't enjoy that 100% or 98% figure if I knew that I didn't deserve it. I didn't earn it. I cheated.
Yeah.
It shouldn't have been that good. And I don't know.
It's about honesty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I plan now for the online training, and I was thinking about almost like an upsell. I was thinking about a certification offer at the end of the training. So there's no formal assessment. So basically the little knowledge checks throughout the training are the tests. That's it. So the certificate, the standard certificate at the end will basically just be a certificate of attendance, where I said, this person has basically completed all the lessons of the training and has attended blah, 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 the course. So what I want to offer as an option, as a voluntary option, is the certification process. And what I thought doing is that if you wanted to do a certification, we would agree a 1 hour Zoom session, just you and I, where I can basically see where your eyes are going and that you're not like cheating and have your manuals on the table and you're looking down and reading. And I will ask you questions testing your understanding. Yeah.
A viva, effectively, isn't it? It's a proper viva of their understanding.
Yes.
Yeah, as you would do when you do your doctorate and they invite you in to discuss your understanding of your presentation, of your dissertation.
Yeah.
One thing you can do there, the way we're sat at the moment.
Yeah.
So what you can get them to do is zoom their camera out so you can actually see the environment they're in. So it's as if you're in the room with them.
Yeah.
So you can almost see what's on the desk. And if they've got multiple screens, you have to suggest that they switch the screens off because you want them to be focused on you, not looking around, not looking left and right, not looking down, because that's the only true way that you can monitor that they are not cheating. Yeah. Some sort of zoom out. So like I'm doing this now. Yeah. So I'm in this situation now where you get the camera to zoom right out. So it's as if you're sat across a desk.
Yeah.
So you can see whether they've got any influence around them whatsoever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got a book there. I can see that.
Exactly. It's my mouse mat. And
this one here, your notes, your cheat sheet,
Exactly, but that's precisely what it's about. So if you've got them to do this, so that the camera's zoomed out to a sufficient distance, you can almost, with certainty, believe that they're not cheating, because it's really difficult.
Yeah, you know what I thought I'd do is basically jumping topics.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
It's not the knowledge checks, for example. If there's a knowledge check about module 3, then all the questions are related to module 3, and the sequence of those questions are kind of in the same sequence as the training content was. And
they can follow it, yeah.
And that's meant to help them, because the point of the knowledge checks is not to assess them, but really for them to identify whether there are any gaps that they need revisiting. That's the purpose of the knowledge checks. So in the certification assessment at the end, it's a different story. There, I really want to know if they understood it. But in this certification, I wouldn't go point for point in the same sequence as the training course. I would start here, and then I jump there, and then I go back here, and so on. So if they were trying to cheat, like finding the right page in the manual, they would be constantly flipping around, so they basically have no chance on looking things up, because they don't know in which sequence I will ask stuff or in which way I will ask stuff. So it will not be like a repetition of the questions from the knowledge check. It will really be trying to gauge whether they have understood the concept, whether they can apply the knowledge. And
it's the underpinning knowledge, isn't it? It's the greater depth understanding of exactly the antithesis and the way that CBTC works.
And again, it's basically my own thing. It's not like a formal certificate where somebody getting the certificate can now compare to someone who's done a similar training in the States or something like that. This is not how it works. The point with CBTC is that the knowledge is not enough standardized and normatized that you can really compare training courses. So if I look at all, we have in Australia the term registered training organization. And they basically offer normatized training courses with a normative outcome that qualifies you in, certificate 3 for railway signaling. But if you look at the curriculum for those trainings, it's manual labor. It's how do you install an exit counter head? Where it's a very clear sequence of steps that you can teach and where you can check afterwards. Here's a piece of rail, here's an exit counting head, show me how you install it. And then you can assess it and tick it off. And then at the end of it, you can give a certificate. Matthew knows how to install, or has demonstrated that he knows how to install an exit counting head. In CBTC,
to the required standard.
Yes, in CBTC we don't have that.
Absolutely not.
How do you want to normatize CBTC knowledge?
That would be exceptionally difficult.
Yes,
because you've got so many complex subsystems that are reliant upon one another. Yes.
So how can you even consider to have a normatized assessment process in Australia if there's only a single person in the entire country who teaches that stuff? No, seriously. I can normatize myself, but this is not what they would accept. This is not what they would accept. They say, well, what are standard elements that everybody needs to know about CBTC? I said, well, I don't know. Honestly, I don't care either. So I teach people the stuff that I think is relevant for them to understand.
I'm actually interested in enrolling on your CBTC course as a delegate.
Feel free. Excellent.
I'm gonna do that. So if you send me the link, seriously, I'm gonna do this because I want to understand what the process is and how you're handling that. And I'll give you some feedback on it. So you give me a 50% discount. Because I've also enrolled on because I'm a guitarist, but I'm more of a collector. So I've enrolled on a guitar setup course. So that's how you set the neck up, how you set the intonation, the height, the string length, and all those elements of a guitar. So if the guitar's unplayable, and I've enrolled on a course to do that as well, which is online. So it's a similar process.
Yeah.
You watch the videos on YouTube when it's on their particular platform. Then you perform the activity on a guitar of your own.
Yeah.
Because you can do it at their workshop. It's a 1-week course. You've got to take a week out to do it.
Yeah.
And you end up with a guitar at the end. Or you can do it online.
Yeah.
So I've got that one running in parallel. But I think it would be worthwhile for somebody to, just somebody to sit it, that you, because I know you,
yeah,
and just work through that process. Yeah.
Hello, this is Doc Frank again. Before we get into the second part of this podcast episode, I want to let you know firsthand of something that's really, really important to me and which will be a real game changer in the signaling industry. If you listen to the podcast so far, I assume that you have an interest in communications-based train control or CBTC. And if you do have such an interest, you will absolutely love the virtual conference that I'm doing on the topic of CBTC. It is called CBTC World Summit 2023. It's an international event with 3 different sessions, one for the Asia Pacific region, another one for the Americas, North and South, and the third one for Europe and the Middle East. These sessions of 6 hours each, so in total 18 hours of conference content, will be held at different times of the day according to the specific time zones. And the good thing about it, that you as a participant of this conference will have access to all of the sessions without skipping on your night's sleep, because all of the sessions will be recorded and will be available for you as replays. So if there are any parts of the conference that you cannot attend because of problems with the time of day, you have always the possibility to get back to the recordings and watch it at whatever time you like. There's a price to the conference, but it's relatively cheap compared to other conferences with much lower reach. So for a global conference of CBTC, it's a relatively inexpensive conference, and it's really, I believe it's a world first, actually. I don't think that anything like this has ever been done before, that a CBTC conference really takes speakers from all over the world and offers them in different time zones for everybody to attend without having to travel to the conference venue. You can register for this conference on my training portal, docfranktraining.podia.com/summit23. I say that again, it's docfranktraining.podia.com/summit23. I would be delighted to see you as a guest at the conference. And now please enjoy the second part of my conversation with Matthew Rea.
It was really a major revamp. It's so different from my live trainings, because of cutting the content up, reshuffling it so that it really makes more sense from a structural point of view, adding some additional things. I have added a lot of stuff compared to the live training. I'm doing a lesson on interoperability, where I'm doing a lot of research on at the moment. It's a very interesting topic, so I'm doing something on that. I'm doing a lesson just on moving block. Previously, I did mention moving block in the training, of course, but now I've got a separate lesson just for moving block. I have a session on supply strategy, which is brand new. I've never done this before, just as a mention or as a concept, but now I've got a whole lesson just on that. Like, how do you plan a rollout on CBTC on an entire network? I have one session on delivery, a concept that I call zero disruption delivery. And these things are nuggets, really. If you are in the right position and you get this kind of knowledge, you can say, well, forget about the rest of the course. This one thing was worth way more than $1,000, because it would save me millions on my project, and years of delays and something like that. So I'm doing case studies there. I'm presenting a case study where a CBTC project was delayed by 10 years. 10.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And just to understand, and you can basically see how it started, and you say that makes sense, that makes sense, that makes sense. Oh, catastrophe! You add all of them together, and it's an absolute disaster. Yeah, and
warning signs. No, it sounds absolutely fantastic. Those elements, those modules, are what you wouldn't normally see.
Yeah,
that's what's interesting about it. That's what's captivating.
Yeah.
And that's when I saw you with the IRSE book that Mark has engineered that. So he's edited it all, put all that together, massive tomes. It's 700 odd pages.
Yeah.
It needed somebody like Mark because he's that focused. Yeah.
Yeah.
To edit something like that, because there isn't anything like it. As you said toward the beginning of this conversation, there isn't a book on CBTC. Where do you go to get it? And it's taken an industry leader to do something about it. You're doing stuff about it. And I'm looking forward to sitting on this. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, great. By the way, you see this thing up here? Where's my finger? There.
I can see that. Yeah, I like the color as well. I love that orange. Yeah.
Yeah, well, orange is my company color. So the shades of orange change from time to time because I never get quite the right tone. But anyway, it doesn't matter. This thing up here is going to be my new podcast.
Fantastic.
It's going to start in January.
Yeah.
And I thought I just put this up there because this is the background that I'm using for my podcast interview. So I did my first one on Saturday, 2 days ago.
Yeah.
With a guy that I've known on LinkedIn for half an hour or something like that. Yeah. This is a story we could spend another hour just on this thing. Yeah. It's amazing. It's a guy, it's an Indian guy who currently works for Thales in Saudi Arabia on an ETCS project in testing and commissioning after he worked for years on CBTC maintenance, again on Thales technology. Yeah.
So Riyadh.
Yes, he's working in Riyadh at the moment on ETCS. But before that, he started in Hyderabad in India, which is Thales SATRAC technology. Then he went to Dubai, again, Thales CBTC, never worked for Thales. He always worked for the operator, for the maintainer. So he worked for Keolis in Hyderabad. Then he worked for Serco in Dubai. Then Serco ran out of contract. Keolis took over. So he worked for Keolis again in Dubai. And then he got an offer from Thales to come and work in testing and commissioning on this Riyadh job for ETCS. So, and he's only come into signaling 6 years ago, 2016. So you look at this career, and he started his signaling career with CBTC, which I find amazing. Yeah, this
front end, isn't it?
Yeah, this confirmed all my views on that CBTC isn't really that complicated. Yeah, I mean he got a formal training. So on his LinkedIn profile, I saw that he got 3 training certificates from Thales, one for wayside, one for onboard, one for data communications. Yeah, and on that basis, he was able to do maintenance work in Hyderabad.
Exactly.
And then he applied for doing pretty much the same job in Dubai. The big change there was from a GOA2 system. You know what GOA is, right? Grade of automation.
It was a good grade of automation.
Yeah.
Grade
of automation.
Great.
So in Hyderabad, this was a GOA2. That means you have still a driver on the train, but you still have automatic train operation. So this is what London Underground is doing, for example. Dubai is unattended. It's GOA4. So you don't have anybody on the train. Yeah. In London, for example, you may know that Docklands Light Rail is a GOA3.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in Docklands, you still have an attendant on the train, which basically operates the door closures. And if there's anything wrong with the train, he just walks to the front, unlocks an auxiliary driving desk and drives the train manually. Yeah, so that's GOA3. Yeah. In GOA4, you have no service staff on board the train. So it's completely, that's why it's called unattended train operation. Yeah. And that's what they have in Dubai. So the big change there for him was to go from a GOA2 system in Hyderabad to a GOA4 system in Dubai. And these are really quite different animals. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I found it fascinating, and especially getting a maintenance guy in front of a camera to do an interview with you. This was spectacular. This was absolutely spectacular. Yeah. So we started chatting on LinkedIn on Saturday morning. It was 11:30 at night at his place, and it was half past 4
in the morning.
Past 4 in the morning at my place. So I got up early. I was on LinkedIn. I saw him messaging. I messaged back. Then I had a look at his profile. I thought, well, shit, this looks interesting. Yeah. And then I asked him the question. I said, well, I'm doing this new podcast idea. What would you think about being interviewed? Yeah, let's go for it. And I basically
literally did it there and then.
Yeah. No, not there and then. Wow. I said, you go to bed, you sleep first. Yeah, I do my, morning routine, shower, whatever. Just wake up, have my coffee. We made an appointment for the same day. So basically his morning, my afternoon, and then we did the interview. Yeah.
Fabulous.
And it was as raw and unrefined as you can get. There was no rehearsal. There was no prepared question. No nothing. I was just talking in the same way that we do. Yeah. So I was thinking, with your training background, at some stage we could do one of those. It's funny.
Do a podcast.
It's funny. I need to raise the left hand to show something that I see on my right hand side.
On your right.
I need to get used to it. This is like a mirror image. Yeah. So
do that.
This is my left hand, and it's on the right side. Anyway, it's a mirror image.
Like in a mirror.
Yeah. So we can do this. We can do this at some stage, but
definitely.
But for now, just let's do the CBTC training and so on. By the way, you work as a trainer as well, don't you?
Last week I was working on the Elizabeth line, so I'm doing assurance. I'm doing assurance at the moment, so I've got some assurance work on HS2. No, Elizabeth line BMS, so building management system. Yeah. So I've just come off a call on that. Plus I'm doing some work for seller controls, which is on HS2, but we're just waiting for a contract to be signed off on that. So what I'm trying to do is keep my breadth out there. Yeah. So I'm doing assurance. Yeah. Plus I'm doing some training as well. Yes. Because, I don't want to become.
Yeah. No, good idea.
Analyzed.
Good idea. That's why I still try to do consulting whenever available, and not just go for the training. And even for training, I try to diversify. So I'm doing CBTC and ETCS. I just kicked off my very first online course. It's just a small training, 100 minutes all up, on high capacity signaling, which is like almost a door opener, an entry level course to explain what does high capacity signaling mean, and then basically leading towards, what are the technologies? Yeah. So you have CBTC, you have ETCS under certain circumstances with some improvements of some of the stuff that you're doing in the UK, like hybrid level 3 or whatever, that would qualify, if you do it correctly, that would qualify as high capacity signaling. So that at the end of the training, you can basically say, you can go deeper into CBTC, and I've got a training for that, or you can go deeper on ETCS, and I have a training for that.